There are moments in life when the world shows you something impossible, something that defies every logical explanation you've ever held on to. For Sarah Mitchell, that moment came on a cold October night when her horse dragged her across 3 miles of moonlit fields to a secret that had been buried for 20 years. What she found there would shatter everything she thought she knew about the gelding she'd purchased 6 months earlier, and it would pull her into a mystery so dark, so haunting, that even the local sheriff couldn't explain it. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand what happened that night, you need to know where it all began. You need to know about Midnight's refusal, about the strange behavior that made everyone in town whisper that Sarah had bought a cursed horse, and about the night she finally stopped fighting him and let him run. Sarah Mitchell wasn't supposed to be a barrel racer. At 32, she was considered too old to start competing seriously, too broke to afford a champion horse, and too stubborn to listen when people told her to give up on her childhood dream. She'd spent 15 years working double shifts at the truck stop diner outside Silverado, Montana, saving every spare dollar in a mason jar hidden behind the water heater in her trailer. 15 years of burnt coffee, demanding truckers, and feet that ached so badly she could barely stand by closing time. But Sarah had a vision that kept her going through every painful shift. She could see herself in that arena, hat pulled low, reins gripped tight, flying around those barrels with a precision and speed that would make everyone who'd ever doubted her eat their words. The problem was, champion barrel horses cost more than Sarah made in 3 years. The kind of horses that could compete at the level she dreamed of were going for $20, $30, sometimes $50,000. Her mason jar held $4,362. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. So when she saw the auction listing for a 10-year-old quarter horse gelding named Midnight, with a starting bid of just $500, she knew something had to be wrong with him. Horses that age, with papers and a decent build, didn't go for pocket change unless they were damaged goods. The auction was held at the Silverado County Fairgrounds on a Saturday morning in late April. Sarah arrived early, the mason jar money converted to a cashier's check in her jacket pocket, her heart hammering with a mixture of hope and dread. The fairgrounds smelled like manure and kettle corn, and the spring air still carried a bite of winter cold. Horses were lined up in temporary pens, each one tagged with a number and a minimal description. Sarah walked past thoroughbreds with bowed tendons, mustangs too wild to train, and ancient geldings being sold for meat prices. Then she saw him. Pen 23. A solid black quarter horse, with no white markings anywhere on his body, standing perfectly still in the corner of his enclosure. He wasn't eating the hay that had been thrown in. He wasn't interacting with the horse in the next pen. He was just standing there, head low, eyes half closed, like he'd given up on the world entirely. Sarah approached slowly, extending her hand toward the fence. The horse didn't move, didn't even flick an ear in her direction. She noticed the scars then, thin white lines crisscrossing his shoulders and hindquarters. Burn scars, old ones, long healed, but unmistakable. Her breath caught in her throat. This horse had been through hell. The auctioneer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker, calling everyone to the main arena for the bidding. Sarah stayed at pen 23 for another minute, studying the gelding. Something about him called to her, something beyond the obvious trauma he'd survived. Maybe it was the way he held himself with a strange dignity, despite the circumstances. Maybe it was the fact that nobody else had even glanced at his pen. Maybe it was just desperation speaking, telling her this was her only chance. She made her way to the arena and found a seat in the aluminum bleachers. The auction moved quickly through the first 22 horses. Some went for decent prices to ranchers looking for workhorses. Some went for almost nothing to buyers. Everyone knew we're running kill pens. Sarah felt sick watching it, but she kept her eyes on the arena, waiting. Then, Midnight was let in. The handler had to drag him every step of the way, the horse's hooves scraping against the dirt like he was already dead inside. The auctioneer's voice took on a practiced enthusiasm that couldn't quite mask his own disinterest. Lot 23, 10-year-old, registered quarter horse gelding, black, 15.2 hands, name of Midnight. Scarring indicates previous burn injury. Seller reports horse is sound, but has behavioral issues. Let's start the bidding at $500. Sarah looked around the arena. Not a single hand went up. The auctioneer tried again, dropping the price to $300. Still nothing. Sarah's hand shot up before she could talk herself out of it. The auctioneer's gavel came down so fast, she barely had time to process what she'd done. Sold to bidder 47 for $300. Just like that, Sarah Mitchell owned a horse. A broken, scarred, behaviorally challenged horse that nobody else wanted. She paid at the cashier window, her hands shaking as she signed the transfer papers. The clerk, a tired-looking woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain, gave her a sympathetic look. "Honey, you know that horse came from the Patterson barn fire, right? 20 years ago this month. Worst fire this county ever saw. Lost 12 horses that night, and the ones that survived were never the same." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What do you mean, never the same?" The clerk leaned in, lowering her voice. "Meant they went crazy. Every single one of them. The Pattersons tried to rehab them, but they had night terrors, wouldn't eat, attacked handlers. They had to put down 3 of them. The rest got sold off to whoever would take them. That one there." She nodded toward the holding pens where Midnight waited. "He's been through 4 owners in 20 years. Nobody can do anything with him." Sarah picked up the lead rope and walked back to the pens, her earlier optimism crumbling with every step. What had she done? She'd just spent $300 of her precious dollars on a horse with severe trauma and a history of being untrainable. But when she reached pen 23 and clipped the lead to Midnight's halter, something shifted. The horse raised his head for the first time since she'd seen him. His eyes, a deep brown that was almost black, locked onto hers. And for just a moment, Sarah felt a connection so powerful it made her chest tighten. This horse wasn't broken. He was waiting. Waiting for what? She had no idea. But she was going to find out. Loading him into her borrowed trailer took 45 minutes and the help of 2 ranch hands. Midnight planted his feet at the base of the ramp and refused to budge. No amount of coaxing, pushing, or bribery with carrots made any difference. Finally, one of the ranch hands suggested backing the trailer up to a loading chute, and that worked. The moment Midnight was secured inside, Sarah climbed into her truck, said a prayer to anyone who might be listening, and started the long drive home. Home was a rented 5-acre property on the outskirts of Silverado with a rundown barn that was more rust than roof, a 3-rail fence that Sarah had spent 2 years repairing herself, and a single wide trailer that had been her sanctuary since she left her ex-husband 8 years ago. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and it was about to become Midnight's new life. She backed the trailer up to the barn and opened the door. Midnight walked out calmly, like the loading drama had never happened, and stood in the barnyard looking around. Sarah held her breath. This was the moment he'd either bolt, attack, or show some sign of the craziness the auction clerk had warned about. Instead, he lowered his head and started grazing on the sparse grass near the fence line, just like a normal horse. Sarah exhaled and led him into the barn, into the single stall she'd prepared with fresh shavings, hay, and water. Midnight walked in, sniffed the hay, and started eating. Sarah stood outside the stall for 20 minutes, watching him, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It didn't. That night, she slept better than she had in months, dreaming of barrel patterns and arena dirt and the sound of a crowd cheering. She had a horse. Finally, after all these years, she had a horse. The nightmare didn't start until the next morning. Sarah woke at dawn, like she always did, and walked out to the barn with a flake of hay and a scoop of grain. Midnight, was standing in the exact same position she'd left him in, head toward the door, ears forward. He ate his breakfast without incident, drank deeply from the water bucket, and allowed Sarah to run her hands over his scarred coat. She was amazed at how calm he was, how gentle. Maybe the auction clerk had been wrong. Maybe Midnight's previous owners just hadn't understood him. Maybe Sarah was different. Maybe this would work. She decided to test him in the round pen, a small circular enclosure she'd built herself from salvaged panels and sweat equity. Basic groundwork, nothing stressful. Just walk, trot, and see how he responded to voice commands. She led Midnight out of the barn and into the round pen. The morning sun was climbing higher now, burning off the last of the dawn mist. Birds sang in the cottonwood trees that lined the property. Everything felt perfect. Sarah unclipped the lead rope and stepped back, asking Midnight to move forward with a gentle kiss of her lips and a sweep of her arm. Midnight didn't move. She tried again, adding more energy to her body language. Nothing. She walked behind him, trying to encourage him forward. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. For an hour, Sarah tried everything she knew. Voice commands, body pressure, a training flag, a long whip held low and unthreatening. Midnight stood like a statue carved from obsidian. He didn't resist. He didn't fight. He simply refused to move. Frustrated and confused, Sarah led him back to the barn. Maybe he was tired from the auction. Maybe he needed more time to settle in. She'd try again tomorrow. But tomorrow brought the same result. And the day after that. And the day after that. For 2 weeks, Sarah tried to work with Midnight in daylight. Round pen, arena, even just walking around the property. The horse would not move. He'd stand, he'd eat, he'd drink, he'd let her groom him and pick his hooves. But the moment she asked him to work, to do anything that resembled training or exercise, he became an immovable object. Sarah started to panic. She'd spent $300 she couldn't afford to lose on a horse that wouldn't work. She'd used up vacation days at the diner to focus on training. She'd told everyone in town she was finally going to compete. And now she looked like a fool with a lawn ornament that ate hay. The whispers started almost immediately. Silverado was a small town where everybody knew everybody's business, and Sarah's purchase of the cursed Patterson horse was prime gossip material. People talked at the feed store, at the gas station, at Sunday service. Poor Sarah Mitchell, they said. Spent her savings on a head case. That horse is never gonna run. The Pattersons couldn't fix him, and Lord knows they tried. She should cut her losses and sell him for meat. Sarah's mother, Carol, drove out to the property on a Sunday afternoon with a casserole and a lecture. Carol Mitchell was a practical woman who'd raised Sarah alone after her father died in a logging accident when Sarah was 6. She didn't believe in dreams. She believed in survival, in making smart choices, in not wasting resources on lost causes. She stood in the barnyard, arms crossed, watching Midnight stand motionless in the afternoon sun. "Baby, you need to be realistic," Carol said, her voice gentle but firm. "That horse is damaged. You can't fix him. The best thing you can do is cut your losses, sell him, and save up for a horse that can actually do what you need." Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "I can't give up on him, Mama. Not yet. There's something about him. I can feel it. He's not broken, he's just scared." Carol sighed, the sound of a woman who'd had this conversation too many times with a daughter who wouldn't listen to reason. "Scared horses run, honey. They don't stand still. That horse isn't scared. He's shut down. There's a difference. And shut down is a lot harder to bring back." Sarah knew her mother was probably right, but something stubborn and fierce inside her refused to accept it. She'd spent 15 years saving for this chance. She wasn't going to let it die in a dusty barnyard because a horse had trauma. Then came the night everything changed. It was a Wednesday in late May, 6 weeks after Sarah had brought Midnight home. She'd finished her shift at the diner and come home exhausted, her feet aching, her back sore from carrying heavy trays all day. She'd changed into jeans and boots, more out of habit than intention, and walked out to the barn to feed Midnight his evening grain. The sun had set an hour earlier, and the Montana sky was that deep purple blue that comes right before full dark. Stars were starting to appear, sharp and bright in the clear air. The moon was 3 days from full, hanging low on the horizon like a silver coin. Sarah opened the barn door and flicked on the light. Midnight was standing at the front of his stall, head high, ears pricked forward, every muscle in his body tense with alertness. This was new. Sarah approached slowly, talking in a low, soothing voice. "Hey, buddy. It's just me. You okay?" The horse's nostrils flared. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but with something else. Something that looked almost like excitement. Sarah fed him his grain, but Midnight barely touched it. He kept turning his head toward the barn door, toward the darkness outside, like he was listening to something she couldn't hear. Sarah finished the evening chores and was about to head back to the trailer when she heard it. A soft, desperate whinny from the barn. She turned around. Midnight was at the front of his stall, pawing at the ground, tossing his head. Sarah walked back inside. "What's wrong? You need something." The horse pawed harder, his hoof striking the stall door with increasing urgency. Without thinking, Sarah opened the stall. Midnight pushed past her and walked straight out of the barn, out into the barnyard, and stood facing the back pasture. The pasture that led to the old county road, the road that went toward town. Sarah's heart started pounding. This was the most animation she'd seen from him in 6 weeks. "You want to go out?" she asked, knowing it was crazy to consider turning him loose at night. Midnight took 3 steps forward, then looked back at her. The moonlight caught his coat, making him look like a shadow given form. Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She went back into the barn, grabbed a halter and lead rope, and walked up to Midnight. He stood perfectly still as she haltered him, then immediately started pulling her toward the back gate. Sarah opened the gate, her hands shaking with a mixture of fear and curiosity. What was she doing? This was insane, but something deeper than logic was driving her now, some instinct she couldn't name. Midnight walked through the gate and turned toward the county road. Sarah had to jog to keep up with him. His walk was purposeful, determined, like he knew exactly where he was going. They crossed the road, Midnight barely pausing to check for cars in either direction, and headed into the open fields beyond. These were old grazing lands, unused for years, covered in wild grass and sagebrush. The moonlight turned everything silver and black, shadows deep enough to hide anything. Sarah's breath came in short gasps, her mind screaming at her to stop this madness and go home. But her feet kept moving, following the black horse, who had suddenly come alive in the darkness. They walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Midnight's pace never wavered. He moved with absolute certainty, weaving around gullies and rocky outcroppings like he'd traveled this path 1,000 times. Sarah had no idea where they were anymore. The lights of town were distant pinpricks behind them. Ahead was nothing but darkness and the endless Montana sky. Then Midnight stopped, so abruptly that Sarah nearly crashed into his shoulder. They were standing at the edge of a wide, flat clearing. In the center of the clearing were the charred remains of a barn foundation. Sarah's blood went cold. She knew where they were now. This was the old Patterson place. The barn that had burned 20 years ago. The barn where 12 horses had died and Midnight had been scarred. The horse was trembling now, every muscle in his body taut as wire. But he wasn't trembling with fear. It was something else. Recognition, maybe. Or grief. Sarah's throat tightened. "Is this where you came from?" she whispered. "Is this your home?" Midnight pulled forward again, walking straight toward the ruins. Sarah's instinct screamed at her to stop him, to pull him back, but her hands wouldn't obey. She let him lead. The barn foundation was just concrete and ash now, overgrown with weeds and wild roses. The county had cleared most of the debris years ago, but you could still see the outline of where the building had stood. Stalls on the left side, tack room in the center, hay storage on the right, all of it gone, consumed by flames 2 decades past. Midnight walked to the far corner of the foundation to a spot where a large cottonwood tree had grown up through the cracked concrete. He stopped there and pawed at the ground, once, twice, 3 times. Then he looked at Sarah. She didn't understand at first. Then Midnight pawed again, more insistent. Sarah knelt down, her jeans soaking through from the damp ground, and started pushing aside the weeds. Her fingers hit something solid, metal. She dug deeper, pulling away dirt and roots until she could see it clearly. A metal box, about the size of a shoebox, rusted but intact. Sarah's hands shook as she pried it open. Inside, wrapped in a deteriorated plastic bag, were ribbons. Blue ribbons, red ribbons, yellow ribbons, dozens of them. And beneath the ribbons, a collection of small silver trophies, tarnished black with age. At the very bottom of the box was a bridle, the leather scorched and brittle, but still recognizable. Sarah lifted it carefully, and her breath caught. Burned into the leather of the browband was a brand, a circle with a lightning bolt through the center. She pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight, her heart hammering. She'd seen that brand before. Where had she seen it? Then she remembered. Midnight's papers. The registration papers she barely glanced at when she bought him. She'd left them in the glove box of her truck. Sarah ran. She ran back across the fields, Midnight following calmly behind her now, like his mission was complete. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs felt like rubber. When she reached her truck, still parked near the barn, she yanked open the glove box and grabbed the papers. She unfolded them with shaking hands and scanned down to the breeder information. There it was. Circle Lightning Ranch. The Patterson Ranch. Midnight hadn't just survived the fire at the Patterson barn. He'd been born there, raised there, trained there. These were his ribbons, his trophies, his bridle, buried by someone after the fire. Maybe by the Pattersons themselves, maybe by a stable hand trying to preserve the memory of what had been lost. And somehow, 20 years and 4 owners later, this horse had led Sarah to them in the middle of the night. Sarah sank down onto the running board of her truck, the papers falling from her hands. Nothing about this made sense. Horses didn't have memories that specific, that long-lasting. They didn't navigate by moonlight to places they hadn't seen in 20 years. They didn't dig up the past like ghosts settling unfinished business. But Midnight had just done exactly that. The next morning, Sarah drove into town with the metal box on the passenger seat of her truck. She had 1,000 questions and no answers, and the only person who might be able to help her was Ruth Patterson, the matriarch of the family that had owned Circle Lightning Ranch. Ruth lived in a small house on the edge of Silverado now, the ranch having been sold off years ago after the fire destroyed their livelihood. Sarah had never met the woman, but everyone in town knew who she was. The woman who'd lost everything in one terrible night. Sarah parked in front of the neat blue house with white trim and sat there for 10 minutes, trying to find the courage to knock on the door. Finally, she picked up the metal box and walked up the path. Ruth Patterson opened the door on the second knock. She was in her 70s now, with silver hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that had seen too much grief. She looked at Sarah with polite confusion. "Can I help you?" Sarah held out the box. "Mrs. Mizzy Patterson, my name is Sarah Mitchell. I bought a horse 6 weeks ago at auction. A black gelding named Midnight. Last night, he led me to the ruins of your old barn and showed me where this was buried." The color drained from Ruth Patterson's face. She gripped the doorframe for support. "That's not possible," she whispered. "That horse is dead. We put him down after the fire. He was too injured, too traumatized." The vet said it was the kindest thing. Sarah shook her head. "Ma'am, I have his registration papers in my truck. He's alive. And I think he's been trying to tell me something." Ruth invited Sarah inside, her hands trembling as she made coffee neither of them would drink. The living room was filled with photographs of horses, ribbons on the walls, trophies on every available surface. Circle Lightning Ranch in its glory days, before the fire took it all away. Ruth sat down heavily in an armchair and opened the metal box. Tears streamed down her face as she touched the ribbons, the trophies, the scorched bridle. "This was Lightning's pride," she said softly. "We called him Pride. He was our best barrel horse, won everything. Fastest times in 3 states. My daughter Jessica rode him. They were magic together." She looked up at Sarah, her eyes red. Jessica buried these after the fire. She couldn't stand to look at them, couldn't stand the reminder of what we'd lost. "We thought Pride died in the fire. The vet told us he had burns, over 40% of his body, smoke damage to his lungs. We made the decision to put him down. It was supposed to happen the next morning." Ruth's hands clenched around the bridle. "But that night, Pride disappeared from the recovery barn. We thought he'd run off to die somewhere. We searched for 3 days and never found the body. Eventually, we assumed coyotes got him or he'd collapsed somewhere we couldn't reach." Sarah felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. "Mrs. Brown, Patterson, if Pride was supposed to be euthanized, how is he alive? How did he survive burns that severe?" Ruth shook her head. "I don't know. Unless someone took him. Unless someone saved him and never told us." A dark possibility hung in the air between them. "Who would do that?" Sarah asked. Ruth's jaw tightened. There was only one person at the ranch who opposed putting him down. Our stable manager, Marcus Webb. He fought with us about it, said Pride deserved the chance to heal, but we didn't have the money for that kind of veterinary care. The fire had already ruined us. We couldn't afford months of burn treatment and rehab for a horse who might never recover anyway. She looked directly at Sarah. Marcus quit the next day, right after Pride disappeared. We always suspected he'd taken the horse, but we had no proof, and honestly, we were too buried in our own grief to pursue it. Sarah's mind was racing. Where is Marcus Webb now? Ruth stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. He left Montana. Last I heard, he was working ranches down in Wyoming. But Sarah, there's something you need to know about that fire. She turned back, her expression grave. It wasn't an accident. The sheriff ruled it arson. Someone said it deliberately. We had enemies in those days. Circle Lightning was the top barrel racing facility in the region, and success breeds jealousy. We were putting other ranches out of business, winning all the major competitions. There were people who wanted us gone. Did they ever find out who did it? Ruth shook her head. The investigation went cold. No evidence, no witnesses. Whoever set that fire knew what they were doing. They used an accelerant, probably gasoline, and they made sure it spread fast. The horses didn't stand a chance. By the time we saw the flames, half the barn was already gone. She sat back down, suddenly looking every one of her 70-plus years. 12 horses died, Sarah. 12 beautiful, innocent animals burned alive because someone was jealous or vindictive or cruel. And Pride, our champion, our star, was supposed to be the 13th, but somehow he survived. Sarah left Ruth Patterson's house 2 hours later with more questions than answers, and a growing certainty that Midnight's nighttime behavior was connected to the fire. That night, Sarah stood in the barnyard as the sun set, watching Midnight in his stall. Right on schedule, as the last light faded and the moon rose, the horse came alive. He pawed at the stall door, whinnied urgently, and fixed his eyes on Sarah with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You want to go again, don't you?" she said softly. "You want to show me something else?" She haltered him and led him out. This time, Midnight didn't head for the county road. He turned east, toward a different section of the old Patterson property. They walked for 30 minutes through the darkness, Sarah's phone flashlight providing the only illumination besides the moon. Midnight moved with that same uncanny certainty, like he was following a map only he could see. They ended up at an old equipment shed, half collapsed and overgrown with vines. Midnight walked straight to the back wall and pawed at the ground. Sarah knelt and started digging. This time, she found a gasoline can. Old, rusted, empty. But when she shined her light on it, she could still see the faded logo. Murphy's Feed and Fuel. The only gas station in Silverado 20 years ago. Sarah's heart pounded. This was evidence. This was the accelerant used to start the fire. But why would Midnight lead her to it now, 2 decades later? What did a horse know about human crimes and justice? She took photos of the can, of its location, of the shed. Then she called the sheriff's department. Deputy Tom Reeves arrived 40 minutes later, his cruiser bumping across the rough terrain to reach the shed. Tom was in his 50s, a lifelong Silverado resident who'd been a rookie deputy when the Patterson fire happened. He looked at the gasoline can with an expression Sarah couldn't read. "Sarah, where exactly did you find this?" She explained everything. The auction, Midnight's refusal to work in daylight, the nighttime runs, the buried ribbons and trophies, her conversation with Ruth Patterson. Tom listened without interrupting, his face growing more troubled with every detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "That fire destroyed a lot of lives," he finally said. "Not just the Pattersons. The whole town felt it. Circle Lighting employed 15 people. When it went under, those people lost their jobs. Some had to move away to find work. Families were broken up." He crouched down next to the gasoline can, careful not to touch it. "We never found the accelerant container. Whoever set the fire must have taken it with them. If they ditched it here, in a shed on the far edge of the property, they were being smart. Nobody had reason to come out here." He looked up at Sarah. "But I've got to be honest with you. This can has been sitting here for 20 years. Any fingerprints or DNA are long gone. And even if we could prove it was the accelerant, we'd need a suspect. The case is colder than ice." Sarah felt frustration rising in her chest. "So that's it? Someone murdered 12 horses and got away with it, and we just accept that?" Tom stood, brushing dirt off his knees. "I didn't say that. I said the case is cold. But cold cases can be reopened if new evidence comes to light. And Sarah, what you found here, what this horse has shown you, that's new evidence. I'll file a report, send the can to the state crime lab, see if they can pull anything useful off it. But you need to understand, the chances of getting a conviction after this long are slim to none." Sarah went home that night feeling defeated and angry. Midnight had shown her the truth, or at least part of it, but the truth wasn't enough. Somewhere out there was a person who'd committed a terrible crime and never faced consequences. A person who'd destroyed a family legacy, killed innocent animals, and walked away clean. The thought made her sick. But Midnight wasn't done. Over the next 2 weeks, he led Sarah on 5 more nighttime journeys. Each one revealed another piece of the puzzle. A scorched leather boot print, preserved in dried mud near the burn site. A section of fence that had been cut, not broken, suggesting someone had let themselves onto the property. A cigarette butt, buried in ash, that Sarah carefully bagged and turned over to Deputy Reeves. And then, on a night when the moon was full and bright enough to read by, Midnight led Sarah to the old Murphy's Feed and Fuel building. The station had closed 15 years ago when the highway was rerouted, and the building sat abandoned on the edge of town, windows broken, pumps rusted. Midnight walked straight to the back of the building and stopped at a patch of concrete that was stained darker than the rest. Sarah shined her light on it and felt her stomach turn. It was an oil stain. Old, but unmistakable. Midnight pawed at it, then looked at Sarah. She didn't understand at first. Then it clicked. Whoever set the fire had filled the gasoline can here, at this station. The stain might be from a spill during the fill-up. It was a reach, a desperate hope, but Sarah called Deputy Reeves anyway. He arrived with a crime scene tech this time, a young woman named Angela who took samples of the stained concrete and photographed everything. Tom pulled Sarah aside while Angela worked. "I did some digging through the old case files," he said quietly. "There was a suspect at the time. A man named Frank Carver. He owned a competing barrel racing facility about 30 miles from Circle Lightning. The Pattersons were putting him out of business. He had motive and he had opportunity. He was seen in Silverado the day of the fire. Sarah's pulse quickened. Why wasn't he charged? Tom's expression darkened. No evidence. Frank had an alibi, said he was at a bar in Billings that night. 2 witnesses backed him up. Without physical evidence tying him to the scene, we couldn't touch him. He glanced at Angela, who was carefully sealing the concrete samples in evidence bags. But if we can place Frank at this gas station on the night of the fire, that changes things. Murphy kept sales logs back then, handwritten receipts. They're stored in the county archives. If Frank bought gas here that night, and if the concrete sample matches the accelerant residue, we might have enough to reopen the case. Hope flared in Sarah's chest. Where is Frank Carver now? Tom hesitated. Still in Montana. He sold his ranch 10 years ago and retired to a place up near Kalispell. Sarah, you need to let me handle this from here. If Frank is guilty, if he realizes we're closing in, he could be dangerous. You've done more than enough. But Sarah couldn't let it go. She'd been pulled into this mystery by a horse who refused to let the past stay buried, and she needed to see it through. She needed justice for the 12 horses who died screaming in the flames. She needed justice for Midnight, who'd spent 20 years carrying the weight of that night. She needed justice for Ruth Patterson and her daughter Jessica, and all the lives that fire had destroyed. The next week felt like an eternity. Sarah went through the motions of her life, working her shifts at the diner, caring for Midnight, sleeping in restless fits. Deputy Reeves called her twice with updates. The concrete sample did contain trace amounts of gasoline, consistent with the accelerant used in the fire. The county archives did have Murphy's sales logs from 20 years ago. And on May 15th, the night of the fire, a cash sale of 5 gallons of gasoline had been logged at 11:30. No name on the receipt, but the description noted a blue Ford pickup. Frank Carver had driven a blue Ford pickup in those days. The pieces were coming together, but they still didn't have enough for an arrest. Then Angela, the crime scene tech, found something that changed everything. She'd been going through the evidence photos Sarah had taken of the cigarette butt found in the barn ash. On a hunch, Angela had sent it to a private DNA lab that specialized in cold cases. Cigarette butts were notoriously good at preserving DNA, even after decades. The lab extracted a partial profile. It wasn't enough for a database match, but it was enough to compare against a suspect's sample. Deputy Reeves got a warrant to collect DNA from Frank Carver. It took 2 weeks for the comparison to come back. Sarah was feeding Midnight on a Tuesday evening when her phone rang. It was Tom. His voice was shaking. It's a match, Sarah. The DNA on that cigarette butt belongs to Frank Carver. We've got him. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. You're sure? Tom laughed, a sound of pure relief and disbelief. The lab is sure. Frank Carver was at the Patterson barn the night of the fire. He stood there and smoked a cigarette while the building burned. We've got him! Frank Carver was arrested the following morning at his home in Kalispell. The news spread through Silverado like wildfire. No pun intended. People who'd lived through the Patterson tragedy came out of their houses and wept in the streets. Ruth Patterson collapsed when Deputy Reeves told her, sobbing so hard her daughter had to call an ambulance. But they weren't tears of grief this time. They were tears of vindication, of justice finally served. The trial was set for 4 months later. In the meantime, Sarah became something of a local legend. The woman whose rescue horse had solved a 20-year-old arson case. News crews came from as far as Denver and Seattle to interview her and photograph Midnight. But Sarah didn't care about the attention. What she cared about was the change in Midnight. The night after Frank Carver's arrest, Sarah led Midnight out of the barn as usual, expecting another moonlit journey to some hidden piece of evidence. Instead, Midnight stood in the barnyard and didn't move. He wasn't frozen like he'd been during the daylight training sessions. He was calm, at peace, like a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Sarah understood then. Midnight's nighttime runs had never been about exercise or training. They'd been about justice, about making sure the world knew what had happened to him and the horses who died with him. Now that Frank Carver was in custody, now that the truth was out, Midnight could finally rest. The next morning, Sarah tried something she hadn't attempted in months. She led Midnight into the round pen in broad daylight. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and the air smelled like summer grass. She unclipped the lead rope and asked him to move forward. Midnight walked, then trotted, then cantered. Beautiful, fluid, powerful. The movements of a trained barrel horse coming back to life. Sarah started to cry. She stood in the center of the round pen, with tears streaming down her face, watching this black horse who'd refused to move for months, suddenly dancing around her like he'd been waiting for permission to live again. Over the next 3 months, Sarah and Midnight trained every day. He remembered everything, the patterns, the turns, the speed. It was like muscle memory coded into his very bones. Ruth Patterson came out to watch them practice, and the first time she saw Midnight run a barrel pattern, she broke down completely. "That's pride," she whispered. "That's my pride." After all this time, he came back. Sarah asked Ruth if she wanted Midnight back. It seemed only fair. This was Ruth's horse, Ruth's legacy. But Ruth shook her head firmly. "No, honey. Pride chose you. He led you to the truth when the rest of us had given up. He's yours now. You take him and you show the world what he can do. You finish what Jessica and I started all those years ago." So, Sarah registered for her first barrel racing competition. A small local event, nothing fancy, but it felt like the Olympics to her. She was 32 years old, riding a horse everyone had called cursed, chasing a dream 15 years in the making. The night before the competition, Sarah couldn't sleep. She walked out to the barn at midnight and found Midnight awake too, standing alert in his stall. She led him out into the barnyard, and together they stood under the Montana stars. "We've been through something impossible, haven't we, boy?" Sarah said softly, running her hand down his scarred shoulder. "You carried a ghost for 20 years. You made sure the truth came out. And now you get to run again. Not at night. Not in secret, in front of everyone, in the daylight the way you were always meant to." Midnight lowered his head and rested it against her chest. Sarah wrapped her arms around his neck and held on, feeling the solid warmth of him, the quiet strength. This horse had saved her in ways she was only beginning to understand. He'd given her purpose, courage, and a story bigger than her own small life. The competition was held at the Silverado County Fairgrounds, the same place Sarah had bought Midnight 6 months earlier. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. People packed the stands, not just to watch the races, but to see the horse who'd solved a murder. Sarah felt the weight of their expectations like a physical thing, pressing down on her shoulders. She sat on Midnight in the staging area, waiting for their turn. Her hands were shaking. Her mouth was dry. What if she messed this up? What if Midnight froze again? What if all those months of training disappeared the moment they entered the arena? Ruth Patterson appeared beside her, placing a hand on Sarah's knee. "You've already won," Ruth said quietly. "No matter what happens in that arena today, you've already won. You gave Pride his life back. You gave me closure. You brought justice to my horses. The rest is just details." Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The announcer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Next up, Sarah Mitchell riding Midnight, formerly known as Lightning's Pride from Circle Lightning Ranch." The crowd erupted in applause. Sarah took a deep breath, squeezed Midnight's sides, and rode into the arena. The moment they crossed the threshold, everything else fell away. The noise of the crowd faded. The pressure disappeared. It was just Sarah and Midnight in 3 barrels in the dirt under their feet. Sarah leaned forward. "Let's show them who you are," she whispered. Then she let him run. Midnight exploded forward like he'd been shot from a cannon. Sarah had never felt speed like this, power like this. He rounded the first barrel so tight, She felt the centrifugal force trying to pull her from the saddle. The second barrel was even faster. By the third barrel, Sarah wasn't thinking anymore. She was just riding, her body moving with Midnight's, like they were one creature, one heartbeat. They crossed the finish line and the timer stopped. 15.3 seconds. A time that would have placed in regional finals. A time that proved Midnight wasn't just alive. He was elite. The crowd went absolutely insane. People were on their feet, screaming, crying, waving their hats in the air. Sarah slowed Midnight to a walk and turned him back toward the center of the arena. Ruth Patterson was standing at the fence, tears streaming down her face, holding up the scorched bridle Sarah had found buried at the burn site. It was a moment of pure, transcendent redemption. Sarah dismounted and led Midnight over to Ruth. The older woman reached through the fence and touched the horse's face, her fingers tracing the scars on his neck. "Welcome home, Pride," she whispered. "Welcome home." Midnight won that day. And the next competition. And the one after that. Over the next year, Sarah and Midnight became a force on the Montana barrel racing circuit. They won enough prize money that Sarah was able to quit her job at the diner and train full-time. She bought the property she'd been renting and fixed up the barn until it was a place worthy of a champion. Frank Carver's trial ended in a conviction. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison for arson and 12 counts of animal cruelty, resulting in death. During the sentencing, the judge read a statement that mentioned Midnight by name, calling him an unlikely hero whose persistence had brought a criminal to justice. Ruth Patterson attended every day of the trial, sitting in the front row, a photograph of her daughter Jessica and Lightning's Pride clutched in her hands. On the day the verdict was read, she stood and addressed the court. "My daughter never recovered from the fire," she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. She loved that horse more than anything in the world, and losing him broke something inside her. She died 5 years ago, and I've carried the weight of that loss every day since. But today, knowing that Pride survived, knowing that he's running again, knowing that the man who tried to destroy him is finally being held accountable, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in 20 years. Justice doesn't bring back the dead, but it honors them, and that matters. Sarah visited Ruth often after the trial, bringing Midnight with her. The old woman would stand in Sarah's barnyard and watch the black horse graze, a soft smile on her face, like she was seeing ghosts made flesh. One afternoon, Ruth brought a box of photographs from Circle Lightning's glory days. She and Sarah sat on the tailgate of Sarah's truck, flipping through images of Jessica as a young woman, riding Pride in competition after competition. The resemblance was eerie. Jessica and Sarah could have been sisters. And the way Jessica sat on Pride, the way she leaned into the turns, was exactly how Sarah rode now. "It's like he's been training you," Ruth said softly. "All those nights, leading you through the dark, showing you the truth, he was also teaching you how to be his rider, how to trust him, how to move with him." Sarah looked at Midnight, grazing peacefully 20 feet away. "Do you think he knew?" she asked. "Do you think he understood what he was doing?" Ruth was quiet for a long moment. "I think horses understand more than we give them credit for. I think they carry memories we can't imagine. And I think Pride needed you as much as you needed him. He'd been waiting for someone brave enough to listen." The years passed. Sarah and Midnight competed at higher and higher levels, eventually qualifying for national championships. They didn't always win, but they were always in the conversation, always a team that commanded respect. Sarah met someone, a fellow competitor named Luke, who owned a ranch in Wyoming. They fell in love slowly, built around shared mornings in the barn and evenings watching the sun set over the mountains. Luke understood what Midnight meant to Sarah, understood that the horse wasn't just a competition partner, but a soulmate in a way that transcended species. When they got married, Midnight wore flowers braided into his mane and stood as a silent witness at the outdoor ceremony. Ruth Patterson gave Sarah away. The mother figure Sarah's own mom had never quite managed to be. Carol Mitchell was there too, sitting in the front row, finally understanding that some dreams are worth the risk. Midnight was 15 now, in his prime, still fast, still fierce. But Sarah knew the clock was ticking. Horses didn't compete forever. Eventually, the body wore down, the joints ached, the speed faded. She dreaded that day with every fiber of her being. It came sooner than she expected. Midnight was 17 when he started showing signs of arthritis in his hocks. The vet recommended retirement before he injured himself seriously. Sarah knew it was the right call, but it felt like losing a limb. Their last competition was at the Montana State Finals. Sarah had kept it quiet, not wanting a spectacle, but word got out. The stands were packed with people who'd followed their story from the beginning. Ruth Patterson sat in the front row, next to Jessica's photograph. Deputy Tom Reeves was there, in uniform, having taken a personal day to watch. Even Angela, the crime scene tech, had driven 3 hours to attend. Sarah rode Midnight into the arena for the last time, and the crowd gave them a standing ovation before they'd even started. She felt tears blur her vision but blinked them away. This wasn't a moment for sadness. This was a celebration. Sarah leaned down and whispered in Midnight's ear, "One more time, Pride. Show them what you are." They ran the pattern like poetry. Not the fastest time they'd ever posted, but clean, precise, beautiful. When they crossed the finish line, Sarah pulled Midnight to a stop in the center of the arena and just sat there, her hand on his neck, feeling his heartbeat under her palm. The announcer's voice was thick with emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the final competitive run for Midnight, the horse who solved a 20-year-old crime and became a legend in this sport. Let's give them the send-off they deserve. The applause was deafening. People were crying openly in the stands. Someone started chanting Midnight's name, and soon the whole arena joined in. Sarah dismounted and stood beside her horse, overwhelmed by the love pouring toward them. Midnight retired to Sarah and Luke's ranch in Wyoming, where he lived in a pasture with 2 other retired barrel horses and a small herd of cattle. He spent his days grazing, rolling in the dirt, and standing under the cottonwood trees that reminded Sarah of Montana. She visited him every morning and every evening, and sometimes she'd halter him and they'd walk the property together, no destination in mind, just being together. On quiet nights when the moon was full, Sarah would find Midnight standing at the pasture gate, looking toward the north, toward Montana, toward the place where his first life had ended and his second had begun. She wondered if he still remembered those nights, leading her through the darkness to uncover buried secrets. She wondered if he understood what he'd accomplished. Midnight lived to be 26 years old. Near the end, when his body was failing and his breathing labored, Sarah made the hardest decision of her life. She called the vet and scheduled the euthanasia for a warm September evening, when the light was golden and the air smelled like hay and wood smoke. Ruth Patterson drove up from Montana to be there. She sat in the pasture with Sarah and Luke, the 3 of them surrounding Midnight as the vet prepared the injection. "He was the best of us," Ruth said quietly, her hand on Midnight's shoulder. "The absolute best of us." The vet administered the sedative first, and Midnight's eyes grew heavy. Sarah cradled his head in her lap, tears streaming down her face, whispering every thank you she could think of. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for showing me the truth. Thank you for teaching me to be brave." The final injection went into his vein, and within seconds, Midnight's breathing slowed, then stopped. His body relaxed completely. The weight of 26 years finally lifted. Sarah sobbed into his mane, feeling like her heart was being ripped from her chest. But beneath the grief was gratitude. Gratitude for every moment, every ride, every moonlit journey. Gratitude for a horse who'd been more than a horse. They buried Midnight on the ranch, under a cottonwood tree with a view of the mountains. Sarah planted wild roses around the grave, the same kind that grew at the old Patterson burn site. She commissioned a stone marker with his name, his dates, and a single line. He ran for justice. He ran for love. He ran until the truth was free. Ruth Patterson lived 3 more years after Midnight's death. When she passed, her will specified that she be buried in Silverado, with a small marker placed at the Patterson burn site. The marker read, "In memory of the 12 who were lost, and the one who survived to tell their story." Sarah continued to compete, riding other horses, winning championships, building a reputation as one of the best barrel racers in the region. But everyone who knew her knew that Midnight had been her once-in-a-lifetime horse, the one who'd changed everything. Years later, Sarah started a foundation called the Midnight Legacy Project, dedicated to rescuing and rehabilitating horses with severe trauma. She worked with burn victims, abuse survivors, horses everyone else had given up on, and she told them all the same thing: you are not broken, you are waiting. And when the right person finds you, you'll show them miracles. On the 20th anniversary of Midnight's death, Sarah drove to Montana and visited the old Patterson burn site. It had been turned into a memorial park, funded by donations from the barrel racing community and maintained by the town of Silverado. A bronze statue stood in the center of the park, a horse, rearing against the night sky with a rider holding on tight. The plaque at the base read, "Lightning's Pride, known to the world as Midnight. He ran at night to bring the day." Sarah stood there for a long time, watching the wind move through the grass, thinking about a black horse who'd refused to let the past stay buried. Thinking about justice and redemption and the inexplicable ways that broken things can heal each other. She whispered into the wind, knowing it was foolish, knowing no one could hear. "I still miss you, boy. Every single day." But somewhere in the rustling of the cottonwood leaves, in the distant whinny of a horse from a nearby ranch, in the silver light of the rising moon, Sarah felt something. A presence, a gratitude. A love that transcended death and time. Midnight was gone, but his legacy was eternal. This amazing story of Midnight and Sarah proves that sometimes the most broken souls are capable of the most extraordinary healing, and that justice, no matter how long delayed, will find its way into the light if someone is brave enough to listen. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope and redemption. Subscribe for more incredible stories of second chances and unexpected miracles. Let us know in the comments below what part of Midnight's story touched your heart the most. Your support means everything to us and helps us continue sharing these life-changing tales. Thanks for riding along with us on another incredible horse story adventure. Whether you're here for the heartwarming rescues, the champion competitors, or the unbreakable bonds between horses and humans, your support means the world to us. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps us share these amazing horse stories with fellow horse lovers and animal lovers everywhere. Got a horse story of your own? Drop it in the comments below. We love hearing from our community, and your story might just inspire our next video. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest horse adventures. We're posting new stories regularly, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Until next time, keep riding toward your dreams, and remember, every horse has a story worth telling.